from it and hope oh, thanks, Rich. And hope that you can,
Sorry.
that's fine. I always love her PSA. It's good.
I forget every time.
I do too. I finally set up all my meetings, Rich, so that they just record and they start with the recording, because I just got so sick of myself forgetting. So that's my only communication, is that welcome and we're glad you're here, and we'll let you know when there's other times. Is there any staff communications? All right, no staff communications. Grace or Joe, would you like to communicate at this time?
I have nothing to say.
Well, sure, Joe, you have lots to say, just nothing right now.
I'm just interested in the Veterans Memorial under old business.
Yes, sir. We'll get there. Thank you. And I'll take Grace, your silence is that not having anything to add at this point. So we'll move on to old business. We're going to do first the Basalt Creek Parks and Recreation draft plan, and that is Rich presenting to us a summary of the community input that was received and proposed changes to the plan from that input. Just as a sort of place setting, what we're doing after we hear that is, of course, we'll have time for public comment, and then we're considering a recommendation as a group to council to accept this park plan proposal. So this was also in your packet. Does anybody need me to drop the packet into the chat? Does everybody have it? If you need it, you can feel free to use chat and I will share it with you as well. So I will now mute. Rich, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Beth. So we're going to run through the Basalt Creek process with you and provide the community engagement and draft plan comments that have been received. And so just want to quickly run by the vision and goals with you. This is in the plan. This is a result of the 2018 Parks and Recreation Master Plan that identified the vision of Parks and Recreation and really talked about the benefits to the community, health, connections, lifelong learning, cultural and natural resources, attracting business, economic development, and community cohesion. And so on to the applicable goals to the Basalt Creek Parks and Recreation Plan. The consultant identified 3 of the master plan goals that apply to this project. And those are expand accessible and inclusive parks and facilities to support community interests and recreational needs. Goal 2, create a walkable, bikeable, and interconnected city by providing a network of regional and local trails. And goal 3, conserve and restore natural areas to support wildlife, promote ecological functions, and connect residents to nature and the outdoors. And you know, these quotes just are, you know, really hit the mark with this and many of our other programs and projects. And I won't read through them. This is in the plan, and I will move on to
Rich, if I can,
yes,
I can just add something really quickly.
Please.
You saw the goals outlined there on that page Rich just presented. I think what's important to recognize too is what this planning effort is not. It's an important component, and that is one that this is not a specific park site planning process. We are not planning for and where the future park or parks will be in Basalt Creek. And so that's an important point to make. What we are trying to do is think at a high level of how parks play a role for the future residents, the current residents, the current and future businesses that are and will be located there. How do business owners and residents interact with the trail system, and how does that trail system connect current and future residents and businesses with city of Tualatin currently, and to the south, the city of Wilsonville, and to the west and east. How does that connection, how do those connections happen? And this is that high level plan about connections. And then two, how do current and future residents and businesses access the future parks or natural areas or open space that are located in Basalt Creek? And so that's the purpose of the document, and just kind of wanted to give that clarification about what this plan is not. We're not citing, we're not selecting a site through this process. We're not designing a park through this process. And so that's important to understand. So thanks.
Thank you, Ross. I'm going to share an overview here of what we're going to walk through during this discussion here. And so we talked about the vision and goals. Just to give you an overview of the planning process and schedule, we started this at the end of 2020, early 2021, and brought a consultant on during a selection process in January and February this year. The consultant started in March and really did internal work, studies, collect information, get all the internal pieces they needed to move forward with community engagement, which occurred in May through November. And we had over 20 different meetings, events, on-site visits, 20 different activities or meetings that involved somewhere around 650, 700 people that gave input and ideas into this process on what would they like this planning area in the city to have in the way of parks, trails, natural areas. That brings us into September and October, where Kyla engaged the community in a final survey, which, brought out, we'll share with you in a minute, information and comments and input on the draft plan. And here we are now, November, December, with public comments, and really, what do people think about that draft plan after it was shared out? And so the draft plan, a draft of the plan was posted November 2nd. Consultant informed and advised. During the first couple of weeks in November, staff did a technical review. There were spelling, directional, formatting issues. The main change with content was a trail map that we'll share with you. And then Appendix A was added, and Appendix A continues to be added to. We don't yet have the most recent survey that we'll share with you tonight in Appendix A, and then Appendix B, there's an additional information posted in Appendix B. And so really Appendix A from page 78 on was added in. Focus groups, meetings, field visits, those things were all included. And they were being finalized during this period of time, and so they continue to grow. But really, the draft plan itself, technical corrections with little content change except for the trail map, which we'll share with you. We had about 90 people take the survey, telling us what they liked and didn't like on the Basalt Creek draft plan. And I'm going to quickly share that input with you. I'm going to have to switch here. Gonna have to change documents quickly here. Okay. All righty, so this is in your packet tonight, and you can see this was the survey and all the different responses to the survey. And I'm not going to go through each response or anything, but you know, we know through the master plan, the community has a perception of a field shortage and other amenity and facility shortages or desires. And you can just kind of go through and you know, see the different comments and input that the community members that took this survey in and provided comments, provide, you know, the input that they and comments that they left. And, you know, natural areas was another one that came through. Trails and connection came through.
I just want to point out, somebody's really big on pickleball. That's what I noticed.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think that there's some groups that are very passionate about what they do in their sport. So
I have a
again,
question here,
this
Rich.
is,
Have these results been codified though? Because it's really easy to scroll through and think you're reading something in terms of like, have they been codified and aggregated? Like we had 9 people say that they wanted more sports fields and 12 people say they wanted more pickleball.
yeah, so they will be, Beth,
Okay.
and they'll be put together. But I guess the bottom line is kind of back what Ross talked about is we're trying to pull out of here, not site-specific planning, but more of the bigger picture Basalt Creek Parks and Recreation Plan. And so we did pull those things out, and we'll share those with you here in a minute. This is but most of these are very site specific. And just so everybody's aware, and this has been our process, is when we obtain a parcel property for parkland, that's the point in time that we engage community members. Here's right out of the master, or right out of the Basalt Creek plan. Design will be used as starting points for detailed community-driven design once a site is acquired. So that's when we run another full process and, you know, engage the community. If a playground is desired in a park, then the community selects the playground equipment. You know, if there's a trail in that park, that next phase of engagement, the community decides, is that a soft surface, a hard surface? You know, what's the priority and length? And it really is dependent on, you know, are we going to be able to attain a 5-acre parcel or a 10-acre parcel? And, you know, right now what we're finding is tax lots in Basalt Creek are either 5 or approximately 5 or 6 or 10 or 11-ish acres, at least in the area that we're looking, or the area that's been identified as the appropriate area for parkland in Basalt Creek. And so number 2 was, you can see people are pretty darn supportive of the trail plan, and we'll share that trail plan here in a minute. And you can kind of see again, just a variety of different, you know, we want the trail to go here, we don't want it to go there. And again, this was an engaging question, but once, the community told us at least 62%ish that they would like a square, flat park space. And so, that would be nice, but really what's available at the time that we have financial resources to be able to obtain or acquire parkland in Basalt Creek will really inform the parcel and could well determine some of the amenities and facilities. And if we get parkland more in the canyon area, that's going to be a natural area. If we get parkland closer to Graham's Ferry, that could maybe have some active recreation amenities. But again, that's not part of this process. That was to engage people, get their opinion, but that planning and operational process and procedures will occur after property is acquired.
Yeah, and just wanted to, just quickly, Rich, if we can, kind of wanted to share with T Park, one of the concerns we heard was about land acquisition specifically, is that, and one of the questions was, is the city going to use eminent domain to take my land and take my house and where I live? And so we clarified that at one of the meetings, and the answer is the city has never used eminent domain to any of our knowledge or any of our records that we went through to indicate that the city uses eminent domain for parkland. We have not done that in our history, and I have no sense whatsoever that would be on the table moving forward. So that the city will only purchase land with the intention of a willing seller and a willing buyer relationship. And that's the intent here. So I wanted to clarify that in terms of acquisition. It's one of the concerns we heard.
And that is in the plan. You can find that in the plan. I'll quickly get through the different reasons why people chose what they chose. Once land's been such plan. This is just asking people like, what was left out? What do you perhaps want that we didn't include? And we got all kinds of course, ideas and information there. And so that ends the survey. I'll quickly go through. We received comments by phone or email, and these are the comments that we received. This is in your packet. And so those are documented, and all this information will be in the appendices of the draft plan, in the future. So really when they're updated, and that's what we're doing here, is looking at updating the draft plan and appendices. And so this will be part of the public engagement in the appendices. For the public record, Grace is on the call. She provided 23 pages of information and comments. Again, I won't go through them, but staff did look at all the information and comments that were provided by all the different community members, and are going to take applicable comments, information, and input and make changes to the draft plan. I will go through some of those changes with you here in a minute or two. And so this is all the information that Grace provided. And then we get into the actual draft plan, which we're not going to go through, but I will continue on and share the screen. to proceed with the presentation here. So that gets us, that was the community input and comments. And so staff, based on that input and comments, are now going through and have gone through and making changes. Primarily, those changes are technical corrections and reformatting. There aren't a lot of substantial changes based on staff review and public comments and input. A lot of them are corrections. There's some clarifications. There's format issues. I'm going to share an example of what staff is doing at this point. So I'm going to share an example of the technical corrections and technical review that is occurring. And then I'll share examples of the content review that's occurring. So this is land use, zone use change. So in our review with the planning department, these are the types of technical changes we're making. Affected agencies with Metro and the state in parentheses, and the addition of notification of property owners within 1,000 feet. So that gives you an idea of the technical changes that are being made. This is on page 97. I can tell you that up to page 50, about a dozen technical changes or total changes have been made, but these changes are a result of public, to a certain extent, comment and input. I'm going to get back on sharing. I know we're jumping around a lot here.
And Rich, just to add, many of the changes that are being made right now are either clarifications or addition of information for purposes. You mentioned technical information, but also feedback we've received through public comment, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also to clarify that the feedback received is a pretty broad array. It can be something as small as somebody who wants a particular playground at a particular site, or it could be something large that's not specific to a particular site. It could be all encompassing of the entire document. And so that, which is why you're not going to see every comment, question, thought that we've received. Not every single thing will be put in the document as an edit to the document. However, all of those comments, as Rich mentioned, are inserted into the appendices. And so that's where we capture everything. So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. And where it says comments and input here, the site-specific design comments and input and operational procedures and rules for future facilities are not something we're necessarily making changes to this higher level plan. The major content changes is a trail map, which I'll share here in a minute, and we're clarifying some process. And then proposed versus planned was mentioned by community members. And so we are changing and clarifying proposed versus planned. In the planning and community development, they mean much different things, and we kind of intermix them in the plan. And I'll show you an example here of that right now. And it is the example of the trail map. So let me find that. Okay. Yeah, thanks for your patience. It just moving between a number of different documents. So this was the trail plan, the proposed trail concept that is in the plan right now. And so there's a couple things that will be changed as a result of public input and comments. And we have planned trailhead here. And so that will be changed to a proposed trailhead. These are, or we expect proposed trails here, but the Sherwood to Sandy Power Line Trail is a proposed trail, not a planned trail, such as the Ice Age Tonquin Trail and some of the on-street wide sidewalks or paths. And so the main change that we made from November 2nd to November 23rd was a section of a wide sidewalk was missing on Boone's. And so that piece was added in. The proposed trail extended past Basalt Creek. We received comments from citizens that own property on outside of Basalt Creek about concerns of a proposed trail being shown on their property. So we pulled that back. That's a metro trail. That's a proposed metro trail that, you know, the Ice Age Tonquin Trail is a planned metro trail. So we're showing the metro trails on our plan. And so those changes were made. Now, the other thing we're going to do is extend Basalt Creek, showing a wide on-street sidewalk. And based on public comment, extend a wide sidewalk as Graham's Ferry manufacturing, or excuse me, industrial property over here. I think this is residential up here, but this is industrial. And as that develops, then that would facilitate a wide sidewalk here. The other thing that is in a past development that did not move forward was streets up in this area. This is residential and is more buildable than the canyon area down here. And so from a past proposal, there's a street system in here that we would have a trail follow. And so we're gonna make sure to indicate that the trail would be informed based on a residential street in here and give us an opportunity to perhaps connect. This is pretty steep, so you know that's a future issue to deal with. But again, this is a larger view, bigger picture plan to connect the community as it develops. And so that's an example of content change being made. This is the biggest content change being made based on public comments during, you know, from the draft plan as we move forward.
Hey, Rich, can you talk a little bit about there are trails shown on this map going through people's property. So can you talk a little bit about sort of how does that work, and kind of let T Park know the process by which these trails that are both proposed and or planned or potential, how does that come to reality?
Yeah, and so right now this trail is on the private property. We'll just talk about the Basalt Creek Canyon Trail here. Right now it's shown, and that was something that was a result of the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan. it's shown on these properties here. And so these are long, narrow parcels that really most of the homes are on Boone's Ferry and run this way in long, narrow tax lots. I think there's about 11 or 13 or so along here. We're showing that alignment more on the industrial property. And that's because when and if the trail plan is adopted, what it would do is, as this industrial property is developed, at that point in time, a condition of the development could be to dedicate an easement for a future trail. And so that's kind of the purpose of the trail map. And most all these are on street except for this one right here. Here's an example here. This development, which it says planned, and that will be changed to proposed. We didn't make it on this, but we haven't turned our changes around to the consultants yet. So this will be a proposed because it hasn't been approved yet. And so that was a comment that came through to us from community engagement, the draft plan review. And so we don't have this yet. This is not in the development code. It hasn't been adopted, and we'll go through that potential when it might be adopted. And so
Rich, just really quickly, so what you're saying is the trails that are shown here, if our community, as this area comes into the city and is annexed in parcel by parcel, becomes part of the city of Tualatin proper, that these trails, without this vision, without this map, these trails will not become reality. And as we heard through this process, that very much people wanted an interconnected system off the roads, on the roads, a way to get around other than by car. And so this is that document. And Rich, do we have any examples in the city of how the city has done this in the past that we can share?
Yes. So right now, if a development is on a trail, say 115th, Coach Development, McLean Foods, they provided us an easement as those properties developed, because that's where the Metro Ice Age Tonquin Trail is shown. So that could be an example.
Or say the trail behind Cabela's, the Tualatin River.
That's correct.
Greenway
Yeah.
Trail.
That's a great example.
If that wasn't in a planning document like this, that trail would have never become a reality. So that's the purpose behind it. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Ross, for cutting that down and explaining it easily. Just so you're aware, council consideration right now, January 10th, a presentation at workshop. The consultant will be there to present. January 21st, consideration by council of acceptance. And then once it's accepted, it goes over to community development. When consideration of adoption, meaning changing the development code so that as that industrial area develops, they have to provide the space for a 12-foot on-street sidewalk or a trail along the canyon in that area. We don't know when that will be. That's out of our hands. Once it's accepted by council, the draft plan is accepted and becomes the plan, Then it goes over to community development, and they do all the technical work, the findings, in order to place this in comp plans and place this in the city's development plan.
And so through that process, Rich, there are, just to clarify, there are steps through that adoption process as it goes to one, our community development department, but two, our planning commission. And that there are steps there for the public to weigh in, provide feedback, provide concerns, thoughts, opinions. And then once it does go to council too, there's also a robust comment feedback period through that process. So just wanted to clarify that step of the process, which is different than this current step in process that we're in.
That's correct, yes. Yeah, and so with that, Beth, I'm sorry it took so long, but that's really kind of an overall summary of the Basalt Creek planning process, the plan, the comments on the plan, the really, really pretty inclusive and extensive public engagement, the different input and comments and review of the draft plan. With that, we'll turn it over to you for either committee discussion, public comments, wherever you want to take the discussion.
I'll leave that to the committee. Would you like to have discussion now, or does anyone have questions off the top of your head? I know, I'm guessing Grace, given her thorough response, might have something that she'd like to say, and happy to give her the floor as well. But Denise or Emma or Josh, would you have any questions off the top of your head or discussion points that you'd like to make sure we touch on first?
No, Beth, I don't. Thank you.
Thanks. Emma is shaking her no. No, Denise?
Sorry, my finger wasn't working. I think, well, I looked at this quite a bit. But I think that the major question that comes out based on the material that was just presented is this idea of a sports complex. And I don't know, was that on a plan somewhere? Or is that just an idea that was presented by the people who gave input? And how well does that actually fit with this plan?
So I'm not sure, Denise, where you're getting a sports complex. I think
The
the
public
plan,
comment.
It's a public comment, yeah.
The public comment is
Technically.
that
Oh, okay.
every other
There was
comment is about a sports complex.
many mentions of it in the public comment.
yeah, of course, yeah. And so there's a perception, there's a need, and I believe the master plan brought it out, that, I mean, we don't have the sports facilities other communities our size. And so there's definitely an effort by different interest groups to enhance sports facilities, have a sports complex. They've been shown to enhance tourism and other things. I think the master plan identified the need for sports facilities and a sports complex, but there's no specific, there's nothing in this plan that calls a sports complex out in the Basalt Creek area. I think we're looking at potentially, possibly a neighborhood park that has, as the plan, says, a flexible multi-use field is really what this plan is calling out. No changes, no content changes to the draft plan are going to deal with a sports complex.
Okay, I mean, it's such a vague term anyway. I don't even really know exactly what that means, but it seems unimplementable, I think, given the description of the central area and things like that. So I don't know. I was just curious as to where it had come from other than public comment.
I'll just speak to kind of echoing what Rich said. It's called out in the master plan. I think that this, as I read through the public comment in this, I heard the voice of this community still saying they want that. and seeing like, hey, this is a chance for a new park, and this is a new parks plan, and I'm not seeing my sports complex. But you intuited correctly, Denise, that the topography of this particular area, a sports complex is not the place to put this. People aren't seeing it because it doesn't make sense. Like, you don't build a sports complex in a ravine. So,
Okay, all right,
but
okay.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Rich or Ross, but I feel like that's the gist.
Yeah, clearly there's a need, there's a desire, there's a aspiration. You see that in the comments section. We, as Rich mentioned, that was also voiced in the master plan process, yeah, as Beth mentioned as well. We are aware of that. However, you know, the right park has to be in the right place, and so we are clearly have a direction for how we meet that need within our master plan, and primarily sports facilities will be, the needs there will be met by, one, enhancing our current sports fields, two, by scheduling more efficiently and managing the use differently, and three, through partnerships with the school district. And so those are our primary methods of meeting the needs for sports venues within our city limits. But certainly there will be many youth who play sports in the future Basalt Creek area, I have no doubt. And so this is certainly, we'll continue to work on this. This is a long-term question that is in our community.
I guess I have one other just question, is that it's stated as one of 3 primary goals to make sure that wildlife is supported. And it just happens to be one of my big issues. But I didn't see a ton of that actually in the report itself, and I read it fairly closely. So I guess my question is, it may just be a phasing issue, but will there actually be people who will go in and assess how wildlife will be accommodated within these areas and how wildlife will move through these areas, particularly things, will they assess wildlife corridors? Will they consider the possibility of perhaps wildlife walks over major roads? I just, yeah, so unclear from the, and it just may be a phase thing. So is that coming up or what?
So I don't believe that's part of the scope of our plan. I think where we support wildlife is when and if we get property in Basalt Creek, will that be a natural resource or a natural park, or will that be an active park, or like at Tualatin, Iback, Jurgens, Tualatin Community Park, will it be a combination of both? We have natural areas in all 4 of those parks and active recreation areas.
Yeah, and I can add to that too, to what Rich said, Denise. And I think it's a good question. One of the things we absolutely heard from a number of different groups that we met with throughout this process, but probably the loudest, I think, was the group of current residents and business owners in Basalt Creek. And so that point, Denise, and your question really, I think, was apparent throughout the process that there is that the creek and the canyon it's just an amazingly beautiful place, and there are wildlife that are currently there. One of the things that's very clear about the canyon in its current state is that much of the canyon itself and the land immediately adjacent to the waterway is probably not at all developable. And whether it be due to slope, whether it be to wetlands, whether it be to the actual waterway, the creek itself, as the nature of this waterway changes as you travel from north to south, south to north, the nature of it, the conditions change. And so we heard that loudly. It's certainly something that we're aware of. and you'll see the metro maps are included in the draft plan. So you can see sort of what's present there now, according to Metro. And so we know that corridor, that north-south corridor, that amazing asset there is not something that's going to be developed. It just won't be. I know one of the things that we heard loudly too is that there is a Washington County planned bridge across the creek and across the canyon. And so certainly one of the questions that came up are, and this is outside of the scope of our work, are the impacts of that bridge to surrounding areas in terms of the noise and traffic. And so we certainly heard that. However, this document is not the scope of this document. The purpose of this planning is not to answer, is not to deal with that. It's not the bridge. The bridge is not included in this document. So, so that's a long-winded answer, Denise. That north-south corridor, the wetlands, the creek, the steep slopes, the forested slope hillsides there are probably not developable, and so that north-south corridor will remain. I don't see why it wouldn't.
Okay. It would be nice if you could actually trace out that it can connect to other corridors, like into IBOC and things like that. And I guess I'm thinking about that larger planning that might be included, which is perhaps aided actually by the trail plan. And I'm not an ecologist, but I wonder if that's true. I wonder if the trails actually serve another topic, but for another day. But okay, thank you.
Brandon, I want to give you a chance to question, comment.
I think the majority of the questions have been asked. I think Rich did a really thorough job of explaining the majority of the items that I had questions on. The only comment that I would provide is if there are any areas other than the canyon that would have maybe other zoning restrictions, like whether it's an agriculture, conservation, and or reforestation land or something like that, that could be held, that would be beneficial, and also lead to better park facilities that would already be pre-made rather than maybe flat. I know flat land is a desire, but that seems like it would be more difficult to come by at a higher cost.
Thanks, Brandon. My only, I'll always ask this question. It's like when we get public comment and feedback and we do other outreach, and I love that we're doing that, right? There were things are not happening in city governance in a bubble or in a vacuum, but I'm always curious, did we set a goal for how much or a percentage of engagement, and did we meet that goal? And if we didn't set a goal, why not? Like I said, I'm always going to ask that question. It's a thorn in someone's side, but I think it's an important one to be asking.
Yeah, I think, Beth, the goal we set is the notification. We can't, we can't make people respond to, and get engaged in our public engagement. But I think we definitely set a goal of social posts and print material, newspaper articles. We set the goal to get out there and inform people that there's this opportunity to get engaged. And so that's what we did, and we definitely met or exceeded that. I believe we exceeded it because we continued the public engagement for, I think, about 4 or 6 weeks longer than we expected. And so we definitely exceeded the number of engagement opportunities as originally planned. For me, 650 people for kind of a smaller area is pretty good numbers. We were definitely extremely pleased and couldn't believe the number of folks we got at the neighborhood meeting at IBAC Park, the neighborhood and property owners meeting. And that again was a result of exceeding our notification by deciding, you know what, some of these people aren't connected to the city. And so we're going to do a mailing, which we don't often do. And we did a hard copy mailing, and 25 out of 70 property owners that we notified, I mean, that we thought that was really good. We expected maybe a dozen. So, you know, we exceeded our expectations there. But yeah, I think that we will try, as we do these planning efforts, to try to more upfront kind of set performance measures so we can work toward seeing how we do in achieving those.
I think even if we just set, even if we just state what our performance has been in the past, right? Like, so like when you say 650 out of our 27,000, right? Like, you know, like 0.02% of our population, which like, like, you're right. Like it's decent given how much outreach, but like when we put it into context there, you're like, okay, was that enough? Right. and the reality is it's what it was, but I think it's just always good to have that context because, you know, again, like looking at this from a business owner, like you can't make people respond, but you also can keep poking until you reach a goal. Like I'm thinking of it from a fundraising standpoint, right? So that's my only piece. Emma.
I would just say also it's really hard to fully put in the correct context the representativeness of feedback, because if all you had were those comments, then you would think, oh my God, Tualatin's a laughing stock in this region because we don't have a youth sports complex that's a tourist attraction. We need to get on it right away. And maybe that's true, but maybe it's not. And maybe most of the people in our community prioritize the chess at the park, which I thought was a really unique. There was only one comment like, we should have a chess element. The fact that there was only one comment about that doesn't mean that like no people would care about it. And I just think that your jobs are really hard and I appreciate what you do. And I think it's important to always try to have that perspective. My only other comment is I love the report. I think it's great. I think it's comprehensive. I get what you're trying to do. And there's this consistent tension between the language that consultants and municipalities and public servants use and the words that the public hears. And I know that documents like this are not always appropriate for like, let me just tell you the real deal. I totally get that. I've written these kind of documents. But to the extent that we're able to have language in documents like this that say things like, we don't know what land we're going to get. Like, obviously, when you read it really carefully, you start to pick that apart. But if you don't understand this process and you didn't have Ross and Rich just telling you all that, you might not totally understand, like, we don't really know what we're going to get. So we're hedging our bets and we're asking you what you like. And one thing you're not going to get is a big sports complex because the topography of this land will not allow it. So I would just advocate that when appropriate, if possible, and, you know, where it makes sense, to use language, if the audience is the public, which I think it is, use language that's just a little bit more explicit and not so amorphous and hedged in, you know, I was going to say it's the municipal version of corporate speak and jargon, you know, and that would be my only comment. But I'm just incredibly impressed with all the work that's gone into this, and bless you all for the navigating of these really important things.
Yeah, I just like to, excuse me if I could add to that because I agree completely because I'm usually confused. Okay, quite frankly. I mean, I've read the report in detail. I think it's a lot for just an average citizen. I don't think an average citizen would get through it, to be in all honesty. And so I think, and in order to be able to get to exactly what Emma is describing, that look, we don't have a piece of land. This is a bunch of potential things. And you know, honest to God, we've been talking about this for 3 weeks, and it's probably only now that I've really read it, fully understand where I think you are in the process and what your goals are for the process. This is more visioning in many respects than it is, you know, a plan, which is where I get confused because I'm like, okay, where's the money coming from? How much is it going to cost? I want to see the details because it may not be feasible. And what you're doing, I think, is more, I mean, it's absolutely essential. It's wonderful. You're visioning, you're trying to put out a picture of what you believe that we should be working to. And okay, all right. I have mixed feelings about more development, but given that it's a given, it's a fantastic plan. Okay. I mean, I really like it, but I have to agree with Emma that it is very difficult sometimes to understand exactly what you want, exactly where you are in the process, which is why I bring up a question like, okay, you say your goal is wildlife, but I don't see a wildlife consultant in there telling me this is how this is going to happen. And the answer may be, look, we're just not there yet. It's a goal, but we're not doing that, or we're just assuming this is going to work. So I just think based on the comments that I saw, my general impression was, one, you have the same problem you always have with this stuff, which is self-selection bias. There's a certain group of people who self-select, who will give you input. And on average, they're in general, not the average public guy. There's somebody with an agenda. And there are a strong agenda usually. And trying to get that self-selection bias out is always hard, yes, but I think you kind of have to. And then I think the second barrier is just the way you ask the question. Did you actually ask them to just read the report? Because is that what happened?
There was a link to the report right above to start the process off. And yeah, that we encourage people to do that.
Okay, I just think that just based on, you know, what I know basically is it's just too much information. I mean, it took me hours to get through it. And I didn't even know there were appendices, honestly. So I'm sitting there aggregating all the financial information because it's spread out all the hell over the place, right? And it's just like, and you're like, well, give me the bottom line. Bottom line here, how much are we paying for this? And so I think trying to ask the average citizen to go through 120 pages and to even really understand where you are, I think is tough. I think, in fact, I wouldn't have tried it. I just think it wasn't going to happen. I think you're going to get people who are going to like blaze through it and not understand it because they didn't read it in enough detail. So that's just my opinion because I had to spend hours to go through it.
And then they're going to say, you asked us what we wanted. We said we wanted a sports complex, and then you ignored us and didn't give it to us when it wasn't an option to begin with in that specific geographical place.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I asked the question, because I was like, where is this sports complex coming from in the context of this plan, which clearly states that we're talking about playing fields.
I think to Emma's comment in the comment section, I think that, and this is, I'm hearing this as a suggestion because I certainly support it as well. I wonder what Josh and Brandon think, but some sort of executive summary, or I'm thinking in more millennial speak, like a TLDR, too long, didn't read, right? Like even pop-ups, like, right, like even someone going through like in a video, like here's the section that's here. Basically, it tells you this, right? Like giving that sort of like, summary piece. I don't know how much that's necessary moving forward to a suggestion to council to adopt this, but if we're looking to continue to have this be public facing document that the public feels a sense of ownership in. That sounds like it's a suggestion from this group to have it feel more. I want to make sure, first, let me give a second to Brendan or Josh. Would you support that same addition or revision?
So there is an executive summary in the beginning of the document, and it's both in English and Spanish.
I would say yes, executive summary, even though you just said it was there. Usually those will come after the document is almost finalized, just to make sure that your executive summary is relevant to the document and not written beforehand. Also, what's the timeline we're looking at? Are we looking at, like, this is the first draft, the first kind of run at this? When land is acquired, if it's acquired, then you would go through the same process again, is what you were saying. So this could be a document that sits on the shelf for 20, 30 years, potentially, before it's used again and gone back to for revision. Yes.
Brandon,
Well, I'm sorry.
you're asking when would the document be revised or updated? Is that what you're asking?
Just like this is not the final document. This is a document to have a plan in place. Should the, it seems like it's a plan to have a plan, which is great, because I would much rather have a plan and not need it than need a plan and not have one. And that seems that this is kind of what this document is doing. So it could sit for a while, but then when land, again, if or when land is acquired, it would go through an additional revision process.
Yeah. So Basalt Creek concept plan was not completed when the Parks and Rec master plan was adopted. So the Parks and Rec master plan did not include Basalt Creek. So this plan is in essence call it an addendum to the Parks master plan. Probably an easy way to think about it. So when the Parks and Recreation master plan is updated, that's when this document will be incorporated into the entire park system plan. So when that happens, I don't know. The last time that the Parks Master Plan was updated and adopted by council was adopted in 2019. Prior to that, it hadn't been updated since 1983. So that gives you an idea as to the length of the last gap between updates. So.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, hey Beth, thanks. So lots of passionate, good dialogue there. I appreciate that. Lots of data and lots of dialogue. So maybe one suggestion, if some of the concern, and I think Emma's the one who stated it well there at the end, which is, hey, you asked us what we wanted, we told you, and then you didn't listen. Can there be, there's an executive summary, which I appreciate and I have not read, so I need to, but maybe an executive response, which is, hey, some of the things that both Rich and Ross have told us here this evening, which is the intent of this is, and we appreciate this feedback, but we can't do certain things such as, and call out the sports complex, just document it. And just as an example, right? Is there an approach there where it can be, hey, here's an executive summary of what we found, and here's a quick executive response of some of the themes, and then it is what it is. And by the way, great dialogue on getting people involved. If somebody's got the magic answer for that, right? But you can only do so much. And I think in this case, a lot has been done. And the people who attempted to do what they did and can stand pretty proud and say, look, we we tried some things, we even tried some extra things, and results were positive, all things, comparing past results. And all I can say is if you didn't feel like your voice was heard, then here's an application to be on T-Park or, right? I hate to be that direct about it, but there's some truth to it. And so anyhow, thanks, Beth. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I didn't mean that's never, I always bring up the question of like, what was our goal? Not because I'm throwing stones at the process by any stretch, but like, I think it's
No,
just
yeah,
important
you're
for us
right.
to-
Your question's spot on. It just that's good.
No, I totally agree. So,
Yeah, we will summarize the third survey in the appendices, and it will be summarized in the chapter in the master plan document that, basically connects to the appendices.
If I can just respond, just kind of generally, I think you bring up a really good point, Emma, Denise, and Josh, and Beth, is that why isn't my project, or why isn't my concern explicitly called out in the document? And there are a variety of reasons why that could or couldn't have happened. And so, but you're right, Josh. I think the athletic concerns or thoughts or feedback are something that we could address directly or should address directly in the document, because there was a pretty abundant number of comments on that, and answering why there's not a giant athletic field complex in this document, I think is really good feedback.
Grace, you've been incredibly patient, so we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to, or Joe, if you will have now thoughts after listening to this dialogue about this topic as well.
No comments.
Thanks, Joe.
Hi, I'm Grace Duccini, and I'm requesting that I'm speaking for both my husband and myself. And if we could get the six minutes as opposed to 3 minutes, I would appreciate that. But it's your determination, and I appreciate your hearing your thoughts on that.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm Grace Lucchini. My husband's John Lucchini. We live at 23677 Southwest Boones Ferry Road, Tualatin, Oregon. We are residents of the Basalt Creek area. We do not have elected representation within this process. We have made that issue known for many of the land use processes throughout that the city of Tualatin has presented. We are not given membership in the CIOs for the city of Tualatin, which is their citizen involvement program for these types of land use actions. So we are very limited in our impact and ability to influence the decisions, which is a requirement of Goal 5 of Oregon State Goal 1 for citizen involvement. But specifically here, I want to commend Rich and Ross for their interest and willingness to include the stakeholders, the Basalt Creek property owners within this process. We were originally asked by to Rich if we would hold a meeting at our house, and due to my efforts of trying to get involvement of our neighbors, the numbers exceeded that which we could have at our place, and Rich was nice enough to find a city facility which we could have. I think we had, I don't know, I think it was over 20 to 30 people show up for that meeting. I think that it's important that the TPAC recognizes how many people were expressing their feelings and desires regarding the potential planning for this area. I don't think that was adequately addressed in the proposed draft. There was very little support of what was being considered, and there was reasons for it were multiple, and I've listed that in my submissions and our submissions to the city. But specifically tonight, I wasn't planning on speaking because I thought the number of pages I already submitted were significant and probably help people go to sleep at night. But I wanted to again stress how I think I'm seeing a common issue here that that has been expressed by all the members of the TPAC, and that is that the basic land use planning elements of understanding what the existing conditions are have not been addressed. The city, unlike other land use actions the city has taken, the Basalt Creek area lacks a goal 5 identification of Title 13 and Goal 5 natural resources within the city's adopted natural resource maps, 72-1 and 72-3. Therefore, it's very difficult for anybody to be able to say that the lands here are inappropriate for building or not building. Whether the impacts upon the habitats, on the natural resources, on the quality of water are not being addressed because the city has not identified that this Basalt Creek area has natural resources in the area, whereas this is identified in other portions of the city, these natural resource maps of the cities. In addition to that, the city lacks a stormwater management plan for the Basalt Creek area. This again is another land use planning action which is mandated by the state, but the city has neglected to do this. They now state that they are going to start planning in the 2021-2022 fiscal year, but the results of that plan will not be available for use in the near future. All these issues identify the fact that the basic questions or issues that were presented have not been addressed by the city and have not provided the existing natural resource identification of natural resources which may be impacted by land use actions in the Basalt Creek area. My husband and I have spent many years trying to restore the natural habitats in the property on our property. You'll see pictures of our property included within the plan here. We feel that the city would be interested in using our property or our property adjacent to our property as part of the plan. And yet the city is stating that they want to exploit the natural resources here by bringing and having the public come in to use it as for recreational use, but they have not yet identified what are the sensitive areas, what are the buffer zones which need to be established around these sensitive areas to protect the natural areas. And the city is required for protection and conservation of significant natural resources in the Basalt Creek area. The city is neglecting to do this, and this is a land use planning action. I think the comments that were made about the fact that this is a visionary document perhaps is on spot, and this is not does not address the land use planning elements which are required by the state. I'm passionate about this. I love the property, the surrounding property. It has so many attributes, and I want it to be available for future generations, which is particularly important in an urban area, which is what the city is attempting to do is planning for urbanization of the Basalt Creek area. But it needs to be done thoughtfully and with good facts included. And I sent an email today that the chapter 2, page 32 of the existing conditions actually has misinformation about where our houses lie, where the natural resources lie, and well as lacks specific and informative information as to where the wetlands, the 14 acres plus of wetlands lie within the Basalt Creek area or canyon area. And this is specific to the canyon area. I would like I would request the TPAC to give greater consideration as to the need for more basic information to be included in the plan, specifically about the natural resources that exist in the plan but are not identified for protection or conservation. This is necessary for the wildlife that live here, and we have class 1 and class A habitats, upland and riparian habitats that are in the area that are all going to be impacted by these kinds of actions. And this is a regional plan. It should be established for regionally as to what areas are appropriate and what areas are not appropriate for recreational use in the future. The city needs to protect this area, and it's their responsibility, and they're mandated to do such.
Grace, I'm sorry, it's your
okay,
time. Do you have
thank you
any
very much. I
final?
appreciate
Yes, of
the-
course. Well, no, we really appreciate you having not just your thorough response in writing, but also your willingness to come and be a part of the conversation and add your voice in this space. And I don't know if there's any response or continued conversation that we want to have with the committee. As a reminder, we have the opportunity tonight, if we want to consider recommending this document with its proposed changes to council. We also have the opportunity to ask for other things, to ask for a revision, to see it next month, and then support it. It's up to us at this point.
Yeah, if I could just mention quickly, thanks for your comments, Grace, and I will look at what you're saying about misinformation. I think that there are many sources for the information, and the consultants took it from Metro. They didn't define the area, so what you're thinking is in the canyon. They're talking about Victoria Woods. Anyway, the land use issue is a community development planning issue and not part of our plan and not part of our scope. There are environmental regulations that are in place, and really some of the things you're mentioning, Grace, are development activities. It's during development that some of the resources are identified, because the resources change over time. At one point in time, a lot of that wetlands was meadows until there was development upstream that stormwater came down and created additional wetlands. So things change over time, land changes over time. At the time we would purchase a property to develop it, that environmental work on that piece of property would be done. So I think you're looking at something a little larger than our park plan here. When you talk about stormwater and environmental protections, that kind of kicks over into community development and the city's development code.
May I respond to that?
Sure, Grace, we're going to limit you on this one though. So that we
Thank you.
can
I
also address it.
think that my name was specifically addressed. I appreciate that. The land use planning elements are universal and are applicable to all municipalities in Oregon. So that stormwater management is applicable to this particular master planning land use action. I would just like to say that the identification of Goal 5 resources and Title 13 resources are appropriate and should have been implemented already, and that my identification of the resources in the Basalt Creek area, I do know for a fact that the Basalt Creek Canyon is to the west of my house and not to the east of my house. There are technical and data inconsistencies in erroneous information included in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Any other moments of comment, questions? discussion? Well, we have the opportunity to consider recommending this to council for the January 10th. Is that right? Did I remember that date correctly from your document, Rich?
Correct. It's January
Work session.
10th, and it would not be adoption, which again is a process down the road in the future. This would be acceptance of the plan, which doesn't contain all the requirements. During the adoption, community development puts together findings that address some of the comments that were made tonight.
What would you like to do, committee?
Well, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. So we talked about a couple things, and Ross, you responded a few minutes ago about possibly addressing some of those. Was that something you could add to this document, or that would be a separate response or communication?
So what item? I didn't hear you, Josh.
We talked a second ago about some of the responses to the specific items, like the sports park, and just addressing that head on as an example.
Yeah, so in the public comment section or chapter, we would address that as we summarize the final survey. That hasn't been done. We just ended that survey, and we have not advanced that to the consultant to include in the plan yet. And so that is the work to be done. That's this kind of final process and stage to provide them with those last pieces to include in the plan, and we can certainly do that.
Thank you. So apologize for my ignorance. So then there really isn't a question yet to submit it because we're waiting on that final step. Is that true? Maybe I'm just totally misunderstanding the steps, Rich. I apologize. So what I heard you say is there's still a little bit of known work to be done. And if that's the case, is it really up for question to submit it as is, to recommend it to go to council as is, or should we wait until that work is done?
Yeah, so these are all pretty minor process changes that do not change the content of the plan.
Yeah, Josh, what we'll do, we will work on some wording to add into this draft that we bring to city council at work session on January 10th. And we will include some clarifying statements about what is not included in the document and why it was not included in that draft document. And we will bring that to council work session on the 10th of January.
Great. Thank you, Ross. And thank you, Rich, both for helping me understand that. Appreciate it.
To that extent, do the concerns that Grace raises, whether they be appropriate or best placed in the public planning and zoning issues, or in community development and planning, or in this document, are those things that also, I know obviously everything that she and her husband have submitted, as well as the other residents of the Basalt Creek area, will be included in this. Are there any other responses to that, or efforts being made to, like, for example, for the inaccuracies noted between topos, right?
Obviously, yeah. And to clarify, there's no misinformation included in the document. If there are errors in the document, we will correct those errors, but we certainly will make corrections if a direction is as opposed to east to west. Absolutely want that to be accurate.
Okay.
So, and then in terms of some of the other detailed concerns, are we going to answer every single concern in the document? No, the answer is no. Our goal is to answer the questions that have come to us. Either some of those questions have already been answered in various formats, or we will answer those questions at the work session on January 10th as they come up at council.
So clarify for me and maybe others, like this goes to work session whether we recommend it or not. Is that the gist?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
this is going to work session. This is at the point in its draft form for council to see it after you've seen it. The purpose of tonight is really one, to get feedback and further information, to have your eyes on the draft, to further refine the draft. And so that as we get comments like we received tonight, where we can make corrections, that's the purpose of tonight, is to make those changes so that when it does go to the council work session, your eyes have seen it. You've heard concerns and comments. You've received all the concerns and comments we've received in writing. And so that's the purpose of tonight.
Okay. Is there any more? Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Nope, sir, you're good.
I was going to say, then to that end, is there any more discussion that needs to be had by this group, this body, before we move on to our next agenda item? Go for it, Josh.
No, I'm not. I have nothing to
Oh,
add.
you've unmuted.
I just came
Feel
off
like
mute just in case.
I've learned my Zoom cues. You're throwing me off. That's fine. All right. Then without further ado, after 90 minutes into our meeting, we're going to move on to old business number 2, which is our parks funding update. Ross, could you bring us up to date on parks funding?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Yeah. So current park system is, as you're well aware, aging and in need of repairs. We have the parks utility fee. We know that parks utility fee is inadequate to address the long-term maintenance needs and the capital needs for new development. So the question of where and how the new parks development is paid for is sort of the question that's been in front of council, in front of you for quite a while now. Wanted to update you on a couple of sources. One, the Metro bond. So $475 million bond was approved 2019 by Metro Parks and Nature. Some of that money goes to cities. One of those grant programs is called Local Share. So a proportionate amount based on your population is allocated to your city. However, it's still an application process to obtain that money. We're allocated around just under 1.6 million. However, we will be applying for those funds for a specific project or projects. And so wanted to just give you a quick update. That grant program is now open. And so we will start to see cities in the metro area start to allocate those dollars based on the grant applications for Local Share. There are also additional future grant programs that will open with Metro and to the point where all of that $475 million will be spent eventually within the Metro region. And of course, the focus of those grant programs are preservation and conservation of natural areas. That's a very high priority goal within the Metro bond program. Meaningful engagement of historically marginalized or underserved community members. And so those are two of the primary. The third is the climate resiliency nature of the projects within the grants. And so as we deploy or as we apply for these dollars, we have to meet those 3 goals. So for example, if we were to apply for the 1.6 million, let's say for the Basalt Creek area for park acquisition, we would need to meet all 3 of those goals in order to obtain the 1.6 million. And so that's just a quick update on what's happening with Metro bond dollars. Secondarily, when council approved the park utility fee, council directed staff to start the research, to start the community conversation around a local funding source. And the primary source available to parks departments is a levy or a bond. And so we are in the midst of that work. We brought on the consultant Barney and Worth, and they are concluding their work, and we should have a report very shortly from them that we will share with you. and share with you what the community has said during that process, and what our community members are interested in for future parks investments, and what the potential amount for future park bond could be. So we'll bring that back to you. So that's a quick update on parks funding.
Thank you. Continuing to try and, Denise, I feel like that answers some of your questions from earlier today that we exchanged about email. How do you pay for it? Yeah. Update from, sorry, any questions about parks funding? Okay. Native land and people acknowledgement. I believe that our last meeting I brought you up to speed in terms of where that sat in terms of the presentation to council. We wait now for the committee. There's a ad hoc committee, I think I'm naming that correctly, that's forming in 2022 in January. And that will be one of that committee's first pieces of work to pick up where the work group left off and carry forward that work. So fear not, I will remain diligent and vigilant in the work that's to see that gets done. Any questions about native land and people acknowledgements or discussion? Okay, we're on to item 4 of old business, to Veterans Memorial Site Planning and Design. Rich?
And we are so fortunate to have the person who has been the driver behind this effort, and that's Joe Lipscomb.
Yeah,
And so Joe's here, and I'll turn over to Rich here, but yeah, this has been a great process with fantastic engagement. Yeah, go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
Yeah, and so I'll get into Veterans Memorial. I just wanted clarification. I had a train going by at the end of Basalt Creek, so there was no action taken by T-Park, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So no, I mean, is there a lack of support for the plan?
I don't believe that's the comment that I took
Yeah,
away.
no, Rich, thanks. I'm glad we circled back on this. Knowing that the work plan is going, we weren't, I was trying to hone in on what the actual question was here, and we weren't trying to make a motion to approve the plan. But, for me, I'm not going to speak for everybody else on here, but I think we can acknowledge that the work seems to have been completed. The feedback has been captured, and certain adjustments and notes have been made, right? And so if we need to make that declaration and formalize what I just said into something clearer, then I suggest we do that so that council knows that staff has presented the findings and we had a chance to talk about it. And maybe it's not perfect, but yeah, we saw the data and acknowledged some open questions, and staff said that they'll address it. So I would say we could comment that back to, that goes along as a rider with the report. Is that kind of what you're looking for, Rich?
So that's fine. I just, again, I'm at the office. We had a train go by. I couldn't hear the wrap up of that and wasn't sure where you're going. So thank you for that. And yeah, there's no action needed to be taken if you don't desire to do that. Veterans Memorial. This is the second phase of the Veterans Memorial planning process. And so we have brought a consultant on board. They've done a number of really internal work, checking on codes and what can potentially be done in the east side of Tualatin Commons, so on the east side of the lake. And really the first phase of this project informed who it honors, what the themes are, what the feeling is going to be. And so this is real, and what the site is. And so Tualatin Commons, east side, and that landscaped area that's pretty much staged out was selected. And now we will go through a planning process to design that area, site-specific design, similar to the Stone Ridge project. We'll end up with a conceptual design. And with that conceptual design, be able to move forward with other activity, meaning construction design and hopefully eventually construction. And so with that, I'd like Kyla to kind of give us an update on public engagement, which is going to start about the first of the year.
Yeah, so we are kind of working to gear up for a public engagement piece of this this planning process. So about mid-January, we plan on updating the website with the latest information on the project, as well as starting about mid-January, start planning our focus groups. We've got probably over about half dozen focus groups that we're planning to meet with and to get their feedback on what they'd like to see. And we're also planning an open house on site. We haven't completely solidified the date there, but sometime probably mid-February is what we're looking at. And we will also be doing a virtual open house for those who cannot attend in person. So that's kind of what we've got going on for public engagement.
So with that, do you have any questions? We do have a focus group set up for Tea Park. Did you say this, Kyla? In the
Oh, I
February
did not. We will, the focus group for Tea Park, we are looking at the February meeting, and we will do a joint meeting with Arts Advisory for that meeting as well.
That's February 8th.
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
Yeah, the different focus groups, DFW, Joe's group, Joe Lipscomb has a group of veterans. Forward Advance is a younger group of veterans in the community. And then some of our advisories, the Youth Advisory Council. And so those are business. There'll be a business focus group. And then Kyla mentioned open houses to get some community input and engagement in based on the first phase that informed what it is, who it honors, what are the site-specific design elements is really what we're trying to get to.
Is there any other, Joe, do you have anything to add or any other discussion items among the committee?
Well, I have no focus group. That was a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay. So Dale and the rest.
Well, there are a lot of veterans that are extremely interested in this, including statewide and area-wide veterans organizations. So, yeah, and there's a fairly good concern amongst the veterans. I apologize for my voice a little bit, but I'm entering my 90th year, so I have a little bit of a problem. There are a lot of veteran groups that are interested in this and have not heard anything from the city. So.
Yeah, that outreach will begin the first of the year, Joe.
We'll just wait and see.
Well, we appreciate you being here and sticking through a long conversation about other topics as well, Joe. And we're excited to see the continuation of this. It's definitely.
Well, the veterans organizations have a lot of concern about how this is going to happen. And so far, we have, not much to participate with you in terms of discussion.
Yeah, it's just starting, Joe. The internal work to inform moving forward with the public engagement is occurred. This project is, I don't know if it's 30 or 60 days, but internal work's being done right now by the consultants, and it's the first of the year the engagement and connection will begin.
Yeah. Well, the veterans are extremely interested in this because it deals with us and the objectives of what we would like to see come out of this will come through us, I think. So, and since we haven't heard anything from you, we're waiting. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And there are a lot of organizations that we have statewide, sources for, but we can't do anything till we know what we're being asked to do.
Yep, you'll be asked to engage in the process. And if you would like to pull those state or other groups together.
I'm not going to do anything till we have something specific. They're very busy. It's an older population. And, when we have something specific we can address, we'll do so. Just like we're doing with the city of Wilsonville on the Oregon Korean War Veterans organization and process.
If I can just try to clearly reiterate. So connection with our community members will begin in January, and that includes an essential group is our veterans. And so the veteran groups will be a key part of this process coming up. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I wanted to add, Kyla's going to be posting, we have a message from our mayor. So the mayor we're going to be posting a message from our mayor about the Veterans Memorial Project. We want as many people as we can get to be involved in this process. And so the mayor's video will be going up on our website and social media shortly, and with the hopes of attracting and getting enthusiasm built up to all who are interested to participate in this. What will be a really cool design. I'm confident of that.
Oh, I have nothing to say until we know.
Thank you for voicing your concerns and bringing that back to our group, Joe. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. Guys, have a good evening.
You as well, Joe. Anything else regarding Veterans Memorial Site Planning and Design?
No.
We'll move on to new business then and the annual report. I assume that we're just looking at what content we might want to include and then scheduling the presentation. Is that correct, Rich?
That's correct.
Okay.
And so if you kind of lay out a schedule of coming up with the changes for us to make, for T-Park to have time to review them, and then which council meeting you'd like to present at, we'll facilitate that.
What we've typically done near Arbor Day, right? I feel like that's what ends up happening.
It seems like March is when you've presented
Yep.
in the past.
And in terms of content, I feel like trying to do that at nearly 8 just off the fly might be a little bit less informed and effective. So if we can perhaps if we can not table, but just have you share with us for the January meeting what last year's presentation was, and then perhaps an overview, just a bullet pointed list in our agenda of the things that we've done, like a summary of things that we have done this year, so that then we can make edits. Does that jive for everybody else? I see a head nod from Emma. Denise, to give you context, all of the different committees from the city do a presentation and annual report to council once a year, hence the word annual. It basically is a summary of the committee's work for the year and aspirant goals for the coming year. Since in my time in being chair, we can try to focus on some of the metrics of like how many meetings we've had and how many hours we put in some of like the key notables in the recent with Mayor Bubnik wanting things more concise. I don't remember what the time limits are now, but we'll definitely keep it more brief potentially than in the years before. And as we already stated, it generally tends to happen sometime around Arbor Day or end of March. Rich, does that jive for our January meeting then for you to bring?
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll put it in your packet and go from there.
Perfect. Tree City USA.
Yeah, just a quick update that Tree City USA application is due. And so staff submitted that yesterday. And I at some point, maybe closer to Arbor Week, we can take a little more time at a meeting, but T Park is the city's tree board. So if there's tree issues, they come to T Park for advice and recommendations. You're the official Tree City USA tree board. And so that is one of several requirements for Tree City USA. Another one is a certain amount of spending per capita on trees in Arbor Week celebration and having tree policies or a tree ordinance. So anyway, at some point, maybe we can talk a little more about that. But as we are submitting this, we're thinking some members are new, may not be aware of your connection with Tree City USA, with the Arbor Week, being the city's tree board.
Yeah, if pardon me, if that's something that we could put on, do we need to do in terms of the Arbor Day celebrations? Is that stuff that's handled by council though? There's usually a declaration and
The proclamation.
a proclamation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got my words wrong.
You usually do a presentation.
Yeah.
I think Brandon and Emma
Yeah.
did it last year. And so anyway.
Okay. Perhaps we could circle back to that as well in the new year, especially if we're looking at annual report. It feels like an easy weave between those and those two items.
Do we
Thank
know
you.
if council meetings are going to be in person in 2022 yet?
Ross would need to answer that. I don't know.
For the foreseeable future, council meetings will be on Zoom
Thank you.
until we know more about the virus, the current variant of the virus, I should say.
Brandon?
Is B City also at the same time?
No, Kyla, can you tell us about that, please?
Our BCD renewal application will be due at the end of February. So we'll probably start looking at that in the new year and getting ready to apply for that.
Thank you, Kyla.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, any updates to programs, projects, operations, volunteers? Or updates on-
Ross, do you have anything?
You know, I don't have anything to report. You saw the Holiday Lights Parade, which is our last weekend of that is this upcoming weekend. So that has been a successful event and program, continuing that program. And then just really quickly, Pole Center programs and activities are continuing. Some of those programs will come back into the building. Many of them are virtual at this point. We're going to start to slowly offer some things on site once again.
Projects?
Yeah, based on the time, and I'm not sure I have anything to report out.
Operations, volunteer needs. Sounds like we're moving
So
along.
operations, if we could just say that some of the leadership in park maintenance are not in the office. And so if there are park maintenance issues that T Park hears about, to circle around with Ross is probably the way to go about it.
So like if we there's a down branch or fence or something, we should connect with Ross on that.
Yeah, you know, a lot of those are call non-emergency police line to have someone dispatched. But if there's other issues, our park maintenance manager's off. And so anyway, things are being just temporarily shifted.
Got it. Thank you for that update. Any upcoming dates beyond our typical second Tuesday evening soiree together that we need to be considering?
Kyla, can you address any calendar items? I think we've given you the council info.
Yeah, just that there's nothing really to alert you that's coming soon. I think, you know, the holidays, January is a pretty light month. So just council and regular advisory committee meetings.
Great. Then committee member communications.
Hey, Beth, can we circle back to the plan for a second?
Yes.
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
make a motion that we approve, the T-Park approves the plan as presented.
We're going back to the Basalt Creek Parks
Yeah.
and Recreation draft plan, and you want to make a motion to approve or to recommend what I'm
To
sorry.
recommend the T-Park, I want to make a motion, I'm trying to word it correctly. The T-Park has reviewed it and we recommend that with the changes that we've discussed here, that the council move forward with it as a basis for the plan.
Excellent. We have a motion on the floor. Does anybody second?
I'm happy to second. All the issues that people had, and I certainly have some as well. I feel confident recommending this plan because, as someone very astutely talked about earlier, it's a plan to plan. It's not a commitment to do any of these things. It's just saying that should the situation and the circumstance allow us to develop a park, we don't want to be starting from zero the second we get the plan. We want to have thought through what we're doing, and we want to have a contingency plan, and we want to put on paper all the things that we have to consider. And to that end, I believe that this plan does a good job of that. Whether we agree with every little thing or we, want to make sure we use native plants or whatever, those things are going to be talked about, and I imagine extensively. So
Okay, so
I
we have a-
feel confident and comfortable recommending and seconding Josh's motion.
Great. Okay, then we have a motion on the table. All in favor. I got a thumbs up, quick thumbs up from Brandon. I also
Aye,
vote to
thumbs up.
approve. Right, so Ross and Rich, if Rich, you could note that we do recommend that council adopt with the changes as discussed in our meeting tonight. Thank you, Josh, for bringing us back to that conversation. I think it was a little muddled given all the I think that does give perspective to some of the confusion though. If this group of people is like, what is this exactly? That's probably warrants some to continue to clarification with the community.
The confusion is when these unrelated items come in, because land use, development processes, development code, it's not applying to our plan, the parks plan. It's a bigger city issue that lies in community development.
No, you're right that it's a bigger issue, Rich. It doesn't, land use does and will apply to this plan, absolutely. I think what Rich is pointing out is that this plan, I think what he was saying was this plan doesn't answer those land use questions because it's a park plan. It's not a stormwater plan. It's not the Title 13 plan. That happens at a later date, at the time of development. As Rich pointed out, this plan doesn't include that work. That happens later. So I think that's kind of what you're saying, Rich.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, just
Go ahead, Denise.
once I understood what you were after, I could appreciate what you had done. I think your problem is the way you're positioning it. I think it's causing confusion. Positioning it as a plan scares the poop out of people. And I think because they think, okay, they didn't think about this or they didn't think about that, or and I mean, I had that reaction. And honestly, I think it's it's an issue of how you're using the words and how you're stating your objectives for that document.
Right.
And sometimes I also think that it's a little scary for somebody to come in and here's the plan. This is, and I will, the first thing I will say is that I'm totally ignorant about how the government runs. So sorry, but the way it seems to me is what I heard from also the Veterans Memorial guy a little bit is the approach we tend to do is hire a consultant and they come up with a plan. And then you ask for the input. Okay. And I'm like, okay, you could have, I think by certain positioning words, you can avoid some of the confusion about, well, when is my input going to be used? And sometimes, honestly, I think it would be easier just to ask people, what are you thinking? Especially for the veterans, because that plan is really big. That's a complex memorial. You're like, holy crow. And it's unclear to me what, as veterans, what they really need. And so just a question, like with the cart before the horse, but maybe that's just the way it's done. And maybe it has to be done that way because people can't give feedback unless they have a framework. And that I understand. But then I think it's just a positioning issue.
Yeah,
I'm not concerned about just putting it in front of the council and saying, this is a plan.
So this is precisely why T-Park exists and why we bring items like this to T-Park. I think that decision-making framework, Emma and Denise, I think is a great way to put it. That helps us articulate what this is and what it's not to you, to council, and then back to our community as we make edits to clarify those elements of this document. So thank you.
yeah.
And if there's anything else that you think of that helps better articulate that, we want to hear it.
Yeah, and Denise, just so you know, site-specific planning is much different than conceptual area planning. So there will be no plan that you see until the community input is finished.
Yeah, it might be overuse of the word plan. That might be, honestly, it might just be as simple as that. And I think people really think a plan is a plan. That means, that the details have been thoroughly thought out and they don't look at the plan like Grace and go, oh my God, they didn't think about this. Well, that was never your intention. Your intention was to create a vision of what could be done as the urban boundary expanded, correct? And it's a good, I like the vision, the industrial people have these advantages that they can take apart, blah, blah, blah. Plus, as I understand it, you have, I think, a fantastic goal of trying to preserve some of the uniqueness of the Basalt Canyon itself. And I just feel like that just doesn't come through in the plan. I just feel like, I was like, wow, man, I want to rewrite the beginning of this because I think I could get people really excited about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to envision a future and put enough on paper so we can start dialogue. And it's all good, but don't sweat the details because we're just not there yet.
Yeah, thank you, Denise.
Oh, you're right. You're right, Denise. That's right. It's a good way to put it. And I love your passion with it.
Well, sorry. I have a lot of that. Unfortunately, a little too much.
Well, it was a engaging dialogue this evening, folks. Unless we have other comments, concerns, questions, topics, we need a motion on the floor to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
That was Josh.
Doug seconds the motion.
That was Emma. Oh, nice. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed?
Thank you, everyone.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
8:08. We're adjourned. Have a good New Year, everyone. See you in
Everybody.
January.
Thanks
You
all.
too.